Our goal for tonight is to look at Rabbi Nosson on Chanukah, Hilchos Chanukah in Likutei Halachos Arihas, and this is in the third volume of Arihas. He's got 6 pieces on Chanukah. Tonight we'll study 1, and if we're lucky, maybe we could even do 2. The first piece that I want to look at is number Hey, 5th, and he says, Inyan Chanukah al pi ma shekosav Rabbeinu b'mamar ba'aloscha es haneros b'simon chaf al. So Kedarko B'Kodesh, Rabbi Nosson tells us in his introduction that he is basing himself on a particular Torah, as we call it, in Likutei Maran, in this case, Torah number 21, Chaf Al. What did Rabbi Nosson see in Torah Chaf Al? That Torah begins with the words Atika, Tmir, Usasim. And there's a word here called Atik, Ayin Tov Yud Ket Kuf. What is this Atik? What does it mean? And based on a pasuk in Tehillim, Achar v'kenem tzartani, David HaMelech says, you have created me Achar, from the beginning. And kedem means moving forward. Says Rabbi Nachman, ki yesh seichel sheha'adam asigos al yidei hakdomos rabos, v'aseichel hazeh mechuna b'shem achar, v'yesh seichel shebali adam below shum hakdama, ela al yidei shefa eloki v'zeh mechuna b'shem kedem, b'shem panim. Rabbi Nachman breaks down seichel, human understanding and wisdom, into 2 categories. One category is called achar. And in order to achieve achar and understand that wisdom, you have to go through many, many different operations. A lot of work has to go into it before you can reach that seichel, which is called achor. However, there's another seichel, which is called kedem, and that seichel does not require any hakdamos. You don't have to work hard to achieve that seichel, because it comes directly from the divine being. And he calls it pnim. And we'll soon see that he identifies that seichel of kedem with atika, atik. He says the following. If a person wants to achieve this seichel, then if we're talking about one level of seichel, that requires, as we said before, a great deal of work and introductions. However, if we're talking about the second category of seichel, which is kedem, and it's given directly by God, then he says the following. Lagia libchinas shefa eloki hanal, to receive that shefa from the divine being, efshar lavo lezeh, ella imkain yikadesh. Okay, now watch what goes on over here. He identifies the seichel of kedem as pnim. The word pnim has 2 meanings to it. It refers to the countenance of a person, of a human being, and it also refers to an inner meaning, the depth and profundity of the seichel called kedem. And now we're going to look at the Menorah, because this piece of Torah is coming to explain ba'alotzcha saneros, How many different konim are there on a candelabra? How many different candles do we have in the Beis Hamikdash? 7, correct? Now take the panim of a person, and what you're going to do is you're also going to arrive at the number 7. How so? You have 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and a mouth. Those are the 7 parts that make up the panim, the countenance of a person. And in order to achieve shefa, receiving the benevolence of God, and the bechina of seichel kedem, otherwise known as atik, you've got to sanctify the 7 parts of the panim. She'ikadish is piv, v'chatmo, v'enov, v'oznov. Only when he sanctifies these 7 parts of his countenance can he possibly receive this special divine benevolence and shefaluki that gives him the seichel of kedem. And what does this mean? Number 1, sheyishmar atzmo milahosif sheker mipiv. He's got to be careful about his mouth, not to say anything that's false. Yira yelo yira shamayim, the fear of God, who bechinas chotem. How does Rabbi Nachman know that the nostrils and the sense of smell is related to Yiras Shamayim from a pasuk in Yeshayahu Navi, V'arichu smell Yiras Hashem. So that's what he gets from the nostrils, Yiras Shamayim. So now he's careful about MS without violating sheker. He's got a fear of God. And next, he has the Oznayim. What is the Oznayim? Lishmoa divrei Torah, to listen to the Chachamim and to Torah. Now he's got the eyes. V'yatzim einov miraos ra. He should be careful to avert his eyes from seeing that which could lead to evil. And now, when he sanctifies these 7 parts of his panim, which is like the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, hey ma'orim es shefaluki hanal lavo. They are actually, through this kiddush, this process of sanctification, they are all activating his mach, his mind, to achieve and receive seichel kedem, kedem meaning atik. V'hema'orim es hamach sheyeh b'bchinas kedem, b'bchinas panim. And the mach, he says, is rosh devarcha emes. And rosh devarcha emes has to do with the peh, the mouth. Reishis chachma yiras Hashem has to do with the chotem. And Shema Divrei Chachamim has to do with the Oznayim, the ears. And then the eyes is Vatipakachna Einei Shneim, to give you an insight through your eyes. And that rounds out the entire picture to the number 7. Ve'hein hein, and these correspond to the Shivas HaNeros. Imagine, Rabotai, if every time you were involved in challenges, whether it be to your eyes, to your ears, to your nostrils, to your mouth, with things that shouldn't be seen, heard, said, or smelled, every time you would think, if I sanctify these 7 parts of my countenance, I will uplift myself to the level of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. Pretty amazing. Now he says the following. The seichel of kedem, hu bechinas makif. Makif means something that hovers on a higher level. It's above my comprehension. How then can I connect to kedem, which is a seichel that comes on a divine level from above, and that seichel is pnim, it gives me a deep insight, and it's atik. Atik means something beyond my comprehension. And he says the following. There are certain questions that we address, that we have. Let's call them philosophical questions that are above our comprehension. And here we have koach habchira, and we are very challenged by these questions to the extent in which we have to have a tremendously firm faith in the Almighty that there will be a solution to these high, lofty concepts that defy our comprehension. For example, Ikar koach habchira is lahavin yediyah ubechira, which means, how do I have freedom of choice if God knows exactly what I'm going to choose? And the Rambam, in his Hilchos Tshuva, he raises the question. The Ravid says that the Rambam shouldn't have even raised that question. We don't have an answer to that question. But we believe in Bechira. We accept on faith that we have freedom of choice. We don't know how to reconcile that freedom of choice with God's foreknowledge. And the answer to this question of Yediyah and Bechira reconciling this is called a makif. Makif means it's above our level of comprehension. However, kishiyichnos ha-makif hazeh lifnim, oz yisgadel ha-seichel anoshi v'yisgalel anoshi ha-Yediyah va-Bechira. There'll be some point in time in the future when the makif will go inside and will know the answer to this question of Yediyah and Bechira. But at that point, we will no longer be challenged to believe and have faith in Bechira, because we'll be able to reconcile this question and have the answer. You know, I was thinking when I read this, there's a Gemara in Menachos that describes Moshe Rabbeinu, who asked certain questions, like about tzaddik v'ralo. How could it be that there's evil that befalls the tzaddik and rasha v'tovlo? And Moshe Rabbeinu started offering an answer to this question, according to Chazal. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, stop. Why? Why would God cut him off? If Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to offer an answer to this question, so Chazal tell us that if Moshe Rabbeinu would have solved that problem, his mind would have reached such a high level that there would be 1,000 other makifim, other questions on a higher level that he wouldn't be able to resolve. And leave it with this question unresolved. V'zeu she'amru chachamim, the Gemara in Brachos, shali aser atzadikim yoshvim v'atroseim b'rosheim. Their crowns will be on their heads. That's what's going to happen at the end of time, liasid lavo, for the tzaddikim. And it doesn't say al rosheim. Usually the Hebrew grammar, when you talk about wearing a crown, it should have said al harosh, on top of the head, but it says birosheim. And what does this mean? Ki la'asid yisbatel habechira. Al rosheim means it's going to go in deeply into the very fiber of his understanding. V'zeu tzadikim yoshmim. Why does the Gemara say that the tzadikim are sitting? Why can't they be standing? Hayeshiva more al heder habechira kemo yoshev bashamayim. The word yeshiva indicates that there won't be any change. And bechira means that there are changes and I have to decide. For example, the Pasuk in Tehillim says about Almighty God, Yoshev Bashamayim, which means there's no change in God. Atnua, when man is standing or moving as opposed to sitting, Mora al Ishtanus mi Ratzon al Ratzon. He's moving out there because he has a different Ratzon, he has a different decision. Hayeshiva, on the other hand, when he's sitting in one place, Mora al Heder Hishtanus. No changes. Bitul Abechira. And why is this? Because Atroseim, the Atorah, the crown, Hainu Hamakifim, they refer to those concepts that are beyond comprehension. K'moshe Kosev, like it says, Shol Vanoshev Otrim El David Bir Hashem. Once again, Bir Hashem, not Al Hashem. Hainu Hamakifim Yikonsu Bitoch Mochim Bifnim Bir Hashem. The Makifim will now penetrate and enter into his mind. Therefore, he will now reach a level in which his mach, his mind, yeda v'yasig osam. Now I'm going to fast forward over here because this is a very long Torah. And he says the following. L'fa'amim yesh, this is Os Zion, Shamochim v'ashef elokihu behelem. That which comes down is hidden. Bechinas ibur, it's like the fetus in its mother's womb that's concealed. Az yafa tza'aka li'adam. When a person desires this higher level of seichel, and it's nelam, it avoids him. It's concealed. He needs za'aka. And here Rabbi Nachman uses a phrase that's very, very new to me, at least. Za'aka bein b'tfila. Okay, that I understand. You cry out in supplication. Bein b'torah. Kinish almin hamochin. When his mind cannot comprehend something, he's got to break out into za'aka, not only as part of his tefillah, but even as part of his Torah. So imagine a person is learning Torah, and there are concepts which are beyond his comprehension. He cries out to Hashem to give him that wisdom, that mach, that he can understand the Torah. V'zeu b'chinas tzur yeladcha teshi. A pasuk in Dvarim. Yeladcha again is the ibur. And tzur, the divine rock, will bring you to understand. Tushia means wisdom, by revealing that which is concealed. The koach ein leleda, pasuk in Yeshaya, kmo isha shetasha kocha milelet. She's about to give birth, and she's getting very weak from the whole birth process. Bishashi koras lelev, when she's in the final throes of birth, ramas ayin kolin. She raises her voice with 70 cries. Kiminyan tevos shebemizmar yancha Hashem biyom tzara. There's 70 words in that capital in Tehillim. The Moledis, and then she gives birth. Then he goes on to find a lot of symbolism in the number 7 and 7 times 10. V'atza'aka shadam tzoek b'tfilasa v'toraso yitchenistalkin amochin b'b'chinas ibur Elu hatza'akos hein bechinas tzakas hayoledes HaKadosh Baruch Hu shu yodeh talumos shel hamochim v'yechnis almu hu mazin l'tzakosenu v'atza'aku b'makom tzakas hashchina v'oz moledes hamochim v'zeu bechinas hakol ma'orer hakavana hainu hamochim. So in order to achieve that comprehension, that wisdom of mochin with regard to that which is panim, it's very deep and it's melam, it's otik, the tza'aka is very, very powerful, very meaningful. Kedei lahotzi hamochin mibchinas leida. Now he goes on to mention what was the attack of the Yavanim against the Jewish people. The Yavanim were philosophers, and they challenged the Jewish Chachamim, the wise men of Israel, with questions like the one we mentioned before about Yudbia and Bechira, or Tzadik Veralo, Verosha V'Tovlo, these kinds of questions, the answers to which the Chachamim couldn't come up with. But that's because there are no answers to these questions in this world. Only Liyasid Lava. But the Yavanim tried to undermine our emunah, our faith, and our commitment by asking all these questions. These are sort of attacks against the Jewish religion. Now, again, there's a lot more here in Torah Chaf Aleph in Likutei Moharan, but now I want to study with you Halacha Hey in Hilchos Chanukah Rabbi Nosson Likutei Halachos. First, he summarizes that point in Rabbi Nachman in Torah Chaf Aleph that is going to be the jump-off point for his discussion about Chanukah. He says, Yesh seichel makif v'seichel pnimi. What's the seichel makif that's above our comprehension? We're going to have to really work hard, and maybe we have to wait until the end of days until we'll be able to comprehend that seichel makif, and the pnimi, which is much more in this world, mekabel me'amakif. It receives its seichel from this higher level of questions that we don't have answers to. Sheyikonsu hamakifim lifnim. The ultimate goal is that these makifim, through this divine shefal Eloki, should enter into our essence. Bechinas vachosem birasheim. So the Torah, which is the crown, represents that higher wisdom, the seichel of Kedem, and now it has to enter into the head. All of the questions and the philosophical didactics of the philosophers, they're all b'seichel hamakif. All those questions really belong to that which is beyond human comprehension, that work as hard as we can. We might not ever be able to understand these things. Again, the example that Rabbi Nachman gave, Akusha shalayidiyah v'abechira. Haseichel hazeh shel yidiyah v'chira hu b'seichel hamakif. The answer to the question, the solution to this unbelievable riddle of how we can have freedom of choice if God knows exactly what we're going to choose, that belongs to the seichel hamakif, which is above our comprehension. V'alkeni efshalem lahavin zos v'nishar kusha etzlam. That's the way God created man, that he would be left with certain questions that are unanswered. V'isa sham shal yidei bechinas shiva neros meir hamakif lifnim. If we reach that level of sanctifying the 7 parts of the countenance, then we can hope that the makif, those higher issues, questions and chakiros, inquiries and investigations that come from philosophical world, and we don't have the answers, they will enter in lifnim, And then we have become Baloschas Haneros, will be elevated like the menorah. So that is Rabbi Nassan's summary of Torah Chaf Al. V'hine Isa b'divrei Rabbeinu Zal shebazeh pasuk Baloschas Haneros merumaz ner Chanukah. The menorah in the Mikdash is a metaphor, symbolic of our menorah of Chanukah, the ner Chanukah. Why? What is ner Chanukah? Hu bechinas ha'oras hamakifim. This is the power of the Jewish nation against the Greeks, against the Yevonim. The Yevonim came and they were pressing us with these unanswerable questions that belong to the Seichel HaMakiv. And now we light the Chanukah candle, which will give us ha'oras hamakifim. It will light up these dark questions so that now the makifim go lifnim. They penetrate into our very souls, our essence. Al yedei bechina shiva neros. Ki anes haya keneged malchus yavan arsha sha'amda al Yisrael u malchus yavan ze bechinas chachmas chitzonios. What defines the essence of the kingship? The greatness of Yavan is chachma chitzonis, which we call philosophy. That's called chachma Yavanis. And he quotes the Yerushalmi to the effect that Ma'u she'yalamed es beno chachma Yavanis, are we allowed to teach Greek philosophy to our children? V'elu ha'chachmos ha'chitzonios heim chachmos Yavanis misham kol apikursis. This chachma, the wisdom of the Greeks, is the source for apikursis. For those who deny God, the Yevonim would hurl these challenges to the Jewish nation in the hope that they would completely undermine the Jewish nation, like Lashkicham Torah Secha, Laviram al Kukerot Secha, Sheyisgabru hapikarsus lahavir dos Torah Seinu akdosha chas v'shalom. That was the agenda of the Yevonim. And therefore, Chazal tell us, Shetimu kol hashmanim. The Greeks defiled all the oil in the Beis HaMikdash. What's the oil? He quotes a pasuk in Shmos, Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. Remember, we said that in order to achieve the knowledge and get that goal of the Makifin going b'fnim, so that these questions won't bother us, we need Kiddush. We have to sanctify ourselves like the Menorah in those 7 parts of the countenance. And that's Das and Seichel, to achieve the ultimate Das, that intellectual comprehension of the Almighty, Shemen Mishchas Chodesh. That ultimate knowledge is called Shemen, it's oil. Unbelievable, a whole new approach to Ner Chanukah. At least for me, it's new. Maybe you gentlemen knew about this. I don't know. I know Yossi is from Efrat, and there they know holy things. But us guys here, we don't know all that stuff. So what are we finding out now? We're finding out that there's something called Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, and that Kodesh of the Shemen metaphorically represents our ability to sanctify ourselves like the Menorah and achieve the Shef Eloki, to make the Makifin into Pnim, so that it penetrates into our very hearts and souls. V'timu, and now the Greeks come along and they defile all of this Seichel through their Chachma, all of the Seichel of Makif. They use that issue, those questions, to defile and to undermine our possibility of achieving Seichel HaMakif. Hishlichu apikarsus bekuchos. When we had the Seichel of Kedusha, of sanctity, they penetrated by hurling all these apikarsus questions. And now they want to defile our Shemen, which is Sichlius de Kedusha. Nasa nes matzut slokit shel Shemen chasum b'chosama shel Kohen Gadol. They discovered miraculously 1 jug of oil that was pure, it was uncontaminated, and it had the chosam, the seal of the Kohen Gadol himself. Truth is that all these questions are not really questions, but we can't understand and know the answers to these questions. This is atik, and therefore we don't know the answers. But the questions are not questions, and that's what we have to believe. Our emunah is that these questions are not even questions at all, even though we can't answer them. We don't have that comprehension. It's a seichel hamakiv, the efshel havin ad liasid love. But all of in this world, zeh seichel sasum v'chasum, atik is now closed, and it's not accessible. Fine. Now he says that this concept of the seichel hamakiv, that knowledge that's beyond our comprehension, is called aye, aleph yud hey, aye makom kvodo, meaning that there's a seichel hamakiv that is beyond our comprehension, above our heads. It's sasum v'nelam, it is now concealed, and that's called aye makom kvodo. Aye, where are you? Because he cannot comprehend it in his knowledge, therefore the Greeks are going to throw all these kashas and apikourses. Now, the next line in Rabbi Nachman requires a little bit of an introduction. In Jewish mysticism, nothing could exist without a koach hachiyus, something that gives it life, that gives it a unika from the Almighty. As we say every morning in davening, the Ata, I think it's in Divrei Hayom, the Ata mechayes kulam. The Ata and you, God, give life to everything. So when we talk about contamination and evil and very bad people, we have to understand that they get their unika from a very high place. Unikosam v'kocham, where do these chachmos of the Greeks, with all their questions that we can't answer, where does it emanate from? Mikdush Elyona, because again, where's the seichel hamakiv? It's up in Shamayim. Those philosophers amongst the Greeks who would use those questions that come from the seichel hamakiv, the unika has to come from a kiddush elyona, from a high point. B'chias aye makom kvodo. We don't know where you rest, God. You know, it's on a very lofty level. Ukshezochem lahavin zos. Once we grasp the truth, shakushos elu nimshachim b'chinas aye b'chinas makiv v'efshel lahavin zos machmazeh biatzmo koshalem kol hakucha shalahem. If we can understand that the reason why these kuchos are above the human intellect of the Greeks is because they come from such a high place. That's what we have to understand. The oz mevinim, then we understand those nisbatlim kol hakusha shalahem ki yodim she'ena kosher klal nak she'ef shalahavin zos machmashu bechinas seichel hamak. We can feel comfortable, calm and secure, because we know that these questions come from the seichel hamakif, from the highest of levels. And therefore, we cannot understand and answer these questions, but we know that they are not questions because they come from the seichel ha'elyon, seichel hamakif. The adarabah zochim leida sheish kedusha gavoy v'elyona mi'od shemisham nivshach elu akushas v'bechinas aye bechinas makiv. He says it's very healthy for us to understand and realize that there are certain questions that we can't answer because they come and emanate from a higher world, a world of Aryeh, and that's very important for us to understand. Why is it so important that the Kohanim found in the Beis Hamikdash a small flask of oil with the seal of the Kohen Gadol, Shematzu Shemen Chasum? What does that mean? Chasum. It's sealed. Let's change that word to concealed. It's concealed. It's locked up. We don't have access to that shemen. It's chasum v'nela, bechinas makif. The shemen in that sluchis metaphorically represents the makif, the seichel makif of Aryeh, and it's chasum b'chosmo shel Kohen Gadol. Why? Why the seal of the Kohen Gadol? What does that metaphorically teach us or indicate? Ki ha-Kohen Gadol nichnas lifnai v'lifnim b'yom HaKippurim b'chinas keser, b'chinas Aryeh, b'chinas seichel ha'elyon. Unbelievable. The Kohen Gadol enters into the Holy of Holies, and there are no kushas, there are no questions, there are no issues. On Yom HaKippurim, it's the Bechina of Keser, which is Atik. The Bechina of Aryeh, it's the Seichel HaElyon. Chainu Shemotzu V'Sigu. What did they find? It says that the Jewish people in the Brisa found a tzlochis shel shemen. What's the significance? Hisigu, what the Jewish people understood, ekol hakfiros nimshachim al yidei sheyesh seichel elyon bechinas makif she'efshal hasigo shemisham nimshach kol hakusha shalem ukchematu v'hisigu zos. When they found the Pach Hashem and they understood this, Hoyanes Neged Malchus Yavan Arshad. This was the miracle against the kingship of Yavan. What does that mean? The kingship of Yavan. What is the essence of their crown? It's Chachmas Yavan, the philosophy of the Greeks. Vehisigu Shakushos Einon Klum. These are not questions. Berak heim b'chinas seichel hamak. And now Rabbi Nosson says something amazing. V'zeu, let's go on in the Brisa. Lo haya bo ela kidei la'adlik yom echad. Yom echad. Please underline those two words. The Brisa says that in the sluchis, they found a volume of oil which would suffice for Yom Echad. What is Yom Echad? V'nasa nes v'dolak shmone yomim. So watch the numbers here. The number 1 and the number 8. Ki zeh seichel ha'makif lo yisgalev lo yoyer ad liosid lavo shu Yom Echad yivoda lashem. That's a puzzle. Yom Echad. Lo matzabo ela kedei lahadlik Yom Echad. And the Yom Echad is the comprehension of the highest wisdom, the loftiest knowledge of God. Seichel HaMakif. Questions that we can't answer. And perhaps, says Rab Nosson, the Yom Echad, that the candles would last, is a reference, it's an allusion to the light, the supreme, supernal light of God, Liyosid Lavo. Wow, this is amazing. The light of God, Liyosid Lavo. Shu Yom Echad. Yivad al Hashem. V'nasa nes v'dolak bot shmones yom. Ainu sheyom echad heir b'toch hashiva yomim shehem bechinas olam hazeh bechinas shivas haneros shal yodam meir hamakif lifnim val yidei zeh hisigu she'eno kosher klal al yidei shekiblu he'ora me'or hamakif. So when they got this inspiration, so to speak, from the light of the makif, is then it lasted for 8 days. V'hainu sheyom echad bechinas olam haba bechinas makif. So all these concepts that we don't understand now, that will be revealed and clear to us at the end of time, olam haba bechinas makif. Heir al yidei shivas haneros bitoch shivas hayomim bechinas olam hazeh. Who could believe what Rabbi Nosson is telling us now? That the Yom Echad, which is the Olam Haba, which is Makiv, is lit up, or shall we say, generated by the Shivas HaNeros of the Shivas Yomim. And the Yomim represents Olam Hazeh. Isn't this topsy-turvy? Isn't this the opposite of what we always would thought to believe? We always thought that the Olam Haba is the great world, and never we have this Olam Hazeh. No. It's just the opposite. Al Yidei Shivas HaNeros, Shivas Yomim, that's the Bechid of Olam Hazeh. And now we're going to light 8 days of the candles. Kedei lahoyer b'yom harishon shel Chanukah ha'ora shel bechinas olam haba shu bechinas yom echad. He says that on the very first night of Chanukah, we create a light that is like the supernal light of the world to come, which is called Yom Echad. And once through that first candle, we are able to successfully generate the Ha'ara, the light of Olam Haba, of Yom Echad, then Misham Nimchach Ha'ara L'chol Shivas Hayom. From that first light on the first night of Chanukah, we are able to create a Ha'ara, a revelation of light for all 7 days. Ki machma shehem timu kol hashmanim dainu shekilkulu biapikarsim apikarsim shalem kol hasichliim diktusha al kein hutzuchu liorer mechadash haseichel shel olam haba b'chinas hamakif. We have to generate a light that comes from Makif, the first candle, which is the Bechina of Olam Haba, and that's the Yom Echad. And now we spring forward from that first night of Chanukah, and the first light, to move from Seichel Hanelam, the Seichel which we call Kedem and Atik, and to move into the Seichel Apnim. And how do we do that? We are ma'orer the Seichel of Olam Haba. We somehow like plug in, like if they have these electric cars now, right? You plug into electricity and you plug into the Olam Haba, which is Makif, the Yom Echad, Kedei lekabel mimenu ha'ara, the Olam Hazeh. And from the lights of the first day, which is Yom Echad, which represents Olam Haba and Makif, now we generate a light for the other 7 days. So that some of the light of the makif will penetrate now pnimi into our hearts. Why mosif v'holech? There's that one single candle on the first night that kicks off the entire process. And by doing this mosif v'holech, we always start again with the number 1, and then we move forward. Ki biyom rishon madlik echad, ubiyom sheni shnayim, ubiyom shlishi shlosha. That's Aleph, Aleph Beis Gimel. Nimta shebechol yom chozer el rishon ki yom rishon meir bechol shivas hayom. So if we sanctify ourselves with the menorah of those 7 different parts of our physiognomy, of our countenance, then through that sanctification, we are able to tap in to the Seichel HaMakif. And from that Seichel HaMakif, the Yevanim drew all the apicursus and hurled it towards the Chachamim. But we were protected. We realized that these kushas are not kushos. Why? Because we recognized that the source of all these kushos is the Seichel HaMakif. And we can now, on the first night of Chanukah, achieve a connection to the light of the Seichel HaMakif that's inherent in the first candle, Yom Echad. And then, from that point on, we could generate a Seichel Pnimi, such that the Seichel Hanelam, that unbelievably high Seichel, which we called Kedem or Atik, that Seichel HaMakif now is going to spread its wings and generate a light on all the other 7 days of Chanukah, to give us an ability, an amazing ability to link in and connect to the Seichel HaMakif, such that now these questions that don't have answers are not questions at all. And all that is achieved through our Kiddush, our sanctification of ourselves. That is what I can give you from Halacha Hey, but I would add one point. There are 2 names of God. There are more than 2, but 2 basic names. One is Yud Kei Vav Kei. How many letters does it have? 4. Another name of God is Adnus. Aleph, Dalid, Nun Yud. How many letters does it have? 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. The 8 Neros of Chanukah correspond to these 2 Shemos of Yud Kei Vav Kei and Aleph, Dalid, Nun Yud. Let's begin Halacha Beis. And I'm going to try to, because we don't have much time left, I'm going to try to sort of summarize some of the highlights of the main points. Halacha Beis is based on Torah Ches of Likutei Moharan, otherwise known as Ra'isi Menorahs Zahav. And here we have a concept called Arihas Harua. And again, this is a very, very deep concept, but I'll try to just summarize it and apologize that I'm giving you a very shitchi, a very superficial understanding, just on the outside. When a person wants to connect with Ruach, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu blew a Ruach into our nostrils at creation, so that you want to hook up to the source of life. The source of life is that ruach. However, tzaddikim nikraim chayim. Chayim means that they are generated by that ruach, that God used that ruach to create man, and it generates existence. So we now have a ruach chayim of the tzaddikim. Now the pasuk says that Ish asher ruach bo, that the tzaddik is, and again this pasuk is referring to Yoshua, is a person who has the ruach. And that ruach, which is the source of life, can be shared by the tzaddik with all of the people. And that's going to give life, chiyus, in a spiritual sense, to everyone. However, l'chol adveikim bo, you have to connect to the tzaddik, connect therefore to the ruach chayim, and you are now connected to Ish asher ruach bo, and at that point you can be mamshich the ruach chayim. How do you do this? So again, this is a long discussion. You have to learn the Torah of the tzaddik in order to link up with the tzaddik, and that's what we're doing now. But you also need to take a neshima. Neshima means a breath through your nose. And by breathing through your nose in a proper way, you connect to the ruach chayim of the tzaddik. Umimenu totzas chayim l'chol echad v'echad l'chol adveikim bo. And then there's the opposite of the tzaddik, and that's called the Rav de Klippa, the head honcho of the Klippas. The Rishonim are not connected to the tzaddik. They're not interested in dveikus and a tzaddik. Heim mekablim Arihas Harua, but they also have to have a connection to the ruach that God created them with. And that ruach they get min Rav de Klippa, from the head honcho of the Klippas. So we have, lahavdil elf havdolos, you've got the Rav of the tzaddik, and then you have the Rav of Klippa. Now, who could stand up against the Rishonim? He says, "He efshar lo ki im hu tzaddik gomor, shehifrish hara min atov." He is completely cut off any evil. He's pure good. He's the tzaddik gomor, and he's the one who could stand and fight against the Rishonim. Kisherotzim lachnia Rishonim, if you want to subjugate and defeat the Rishonim, tzrichim lereid b'toch mida rosh ala rosh. We have to literally enter into the pipelines, the tzinar of the Russia, and that's very, very dangerous. Lachnia ulashpila al yidei ze mashpil Rishonim adei oretz, and mashpil Rishonim adei oretz is Rashi Tevos of Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Ofar. Shehem ha'arba yisodos shebihem kol amidos, and that's what it's all about. V'zeh b'chinas Chanukah, Chanukah tzrichem lamod k'neged Rishonim. Wow! But who can stand against the Rishonim? We can't stand up against the Rishonim, because to stand against the Rishonim, we have to enter into their pipelines, which are low and contaminated. It's very, very dangerous. Only a tzaddik gomer could do such a thing. Limnoah ulevatel, these tzinoros of the Rishonim, Says Rabbi Nosson, the Ner Chanukah represents the Tzaddik Gomer. Bisman HaNeshel Chanukah Omdo Leinu Malchus Yovan Arsha Lashkicham Torasenu Ulaviram Nichukei Ritzonecha Kamo Shenase Zos Bechol Dar V'Dar. Just like the Greeks wanted to undermine our Torah, that's going to happen in each generation. There'll be not the Greeks, there'll be some other nation. And what's Chanukah all about? On Chanukah, just like at the time of the Chashmonaim, they stood up against those Rishonim who were Lashkicham Torasecha. That was the job of Matisyahu, Kohen Gadol, etc., that were saturated with Kedusha. The Anu Tzricha B'mei Chanukah Lamod Keneged Malchus Harsha Shemiskaberes B'chol Dar V'Dar V'hem HaRishayim HaOmdim Aleinu Levatel Osanu Chas V'Shalom Me'avodaso Yisparach the Anu Tzrichim L'Sgaber V'Lamod Kenegdom the Efshal Lamod Kenegdom. If Chanukah is all about standing up against the Malchus Harsha, well, who can stand up against these Rishayim? Ki im al yidei koach hatzadik. We must connect to the tzaddik. V'zeu b'chinas ner Chanukah nikar or k'mo shekosu v'posel Yeshaya imru tzaddik ki tov v'yein tov ela or shenemar vayar elokim es ha'or ki tov ki zeh hatzadik hu tov gomur. How do you get to the point of tov gomur? There's no ra at all. Ki hifrish hara legamre v'nishar kulo tov valkei nikra tov dahainu or v'zeh b'chinas ner Chanukah shalo mamshichim u'makablim koach atzadik shenikra or b'chinas ner Hashem nishmas odom v'al yidei zeh hakoach Dahainu al yidei or hatzadik shu b'chinas tov k'mo shekosuv vayar elokim es ha'or ki tov al yidei zeh oni yicholim lamod keneged malchus harsha ki efshar, as we saw in Likutei Maran, lamod kenegdom ki im al yidei b'chinas kulo tov. Only kulo tov stands a chance to defeat the Malchus Harsha, Bechinas Tzadik Gomer. The Tzadik who's Kulo Tov is a manifestation of the Tzadik Gomer. Ki tzrichim lered l'toch hara shalahem l'shabro ulashpilo. We need something, some power, to enter in to the Ra itself and break up the Ra and be mashpil. Where do we get such a car? We don't have it. And the answer is that Tzaddik has it. He's the one who can enter and lamod keneged malchus harsha. And we have to give the Tzaddik our support, and we have to be dependent upon the tzaddik to do this job of standing up against Omdo Malchus Yovan Arsha. Only the tzaddik can do that. And now, just to summarize, beautiful presentation here in the next two paragraphs about how through our neshima we connect with the tzaddik ha'amiti, the true tzaddik. He says that there are three halachos in Ner Chanukah that are fascinating. One is lamata me'asar tefachim. It's got to be below 10 tefachim. Number two, b'shus harab, you should light outside the public area. B'tefach hasamuch lepesach. And the third halacha means you should light the Ner Chanukah right near your entrance. Why? Especially this halacha lamata miyud tfachim that's like all the way on the ground. Where is the sitra achra? Where does he have, where does he flourish? It's in the lower areas, lamata miyud. Why? Because the Shechina comes down up to Yud Tvachim. It doesn't go below. So there's no Shechina there, and the Sitra Achra is having a heyday. Now, why do we have to light in Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is Makom HaKlipos. V'sham dafka tzrichim la'adlik ner Chanukah. The R of ner Chanukah to defeat the Klipos has to be effective in Rosh Hashanah because that's where the Klipos are attacking us. Shezeu b'chinas yored koach hatzadik l'toch achizas harosh lachnio ulashpila. And now we can understand al kedu b'Pesach hasamach tefach hasamach b'Pesach ki achizosam urak b'bchinas Pesach. Where do these klipos and where does the Sitra Achra hang out? In front of the entranceway into your house to block your entranceway. So again, I want to thank you because I never guessed that we get halfway through Halacha Beis. I mean, we're not finished. There's a lot more over here, a lot more. And it's all based on a very, very profound presentation in Simon Ches of Rabbi Nachman in Likutei Maran. But I hope and I pray that some of these ideas will penetrate our hearts and our souls like a makiv. That now that we appreciate that all those chachmos of the Avonim and the Apikoros comes from the makiv, we begin to understand that we don't have any questions. There are no questions. We don't know the answers to those questions, but there are no questions. And we now, through Kiddush, by sanctifying our pnim, our panim, we are able to achieve a connection to the seichel that is pnim, that is otik, that ultimate seichel of makif, and furthermore, again, adding on halacha beis, all these places, Lamata miyud, Pesach hasamach tefach hasamach Pesach, Rosh Hashanah, all these are locations that are designated for high-powered klipos. The Rav Klipa, that's where he's having a blast over there, hurling, as it were, these questions at us. And here's where the Ner Chanukah calls upon us, each and every one of us, to defeat those terrible mazikim, those klipos that are going to no doubt claim that we can't overcome all the temptations in life. And that's what the Ner Chanukah is going to represent. We're going to need that neshima. We're going to need the tzaddik who's capable of entering into the rasha, into the very arteries of the rasha, after which the rasha just falls apart. I don't mean physically, but spiritually. And that is the Ner Chanukah. So let me take this opportunity to thank you and wish you all a wonderful, wonderful Chanukah. We're about halfway through. And also take this opportunity, if I don't see you before Shabbos, because I'll be here in Har Nof on Shabbos. So wishing you a wonderful Shabbos Chan. Thank you so much.
Chanukah Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very
Shabbat
much.
Shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Chanukah Sameach.
Thank you. Thank you.